In the silence of deep space, the starship Eos drifted like a tiny speck against the endless black. Captain Daniel Carter stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the glowing console in front of him. The ship had been traveling for years, far from Earth, searching for a new home among the stars. But Earth was gone now, or so they thought. Until today. A faint crackle broke the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Rachel Monroe, the communications officer, frowned as she adjusted her headset. "Captain, we're picking up something," she said, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "It's weak, but it's there." Daniel turned to face her. "Where's it coming from?" Rachel hesitated, her fingers flying over the controls. "Earth, or what's left of it." Her words hung heavy in the air. Earth had fallen silent decades ago, its once blue skies choked by pollution, and its oceans dried up. Most believed the planet was dead, swallowed by humanity's own mistakes. Yet here was a signal, faint but unmistakable, reaching across the void. Samuel Brooks, the ship's engineer, leaned over Rachel's shoulder, his brow furrowed as he studied the data. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Nothing could have survived down there. Not after everything that happened." "Play it," Daniel ordered, his tone sharp but calm. Rachel nodded and pressed a button. At first, all they heard was static, a hiss of white noise that seemed to stretch endlessly. Then, slowly, a voice emerged, distorted and broken. It was soft, almost a whisper, but the words were clear enough to send chills down their spines. "This is the end you chose." The room fell silent. Claire Foster, the ship's biologist, stood frozen near the doorway, her hands gripping the frame. No one spoke. The message repeated itself over and over, as if the sender wanted to make sure it was heard. "What does it mean?" Claire finally asked, her voice trembling. "Who sent it?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, rubbing his temples. He felt a weight pressing down on him, a mix of guilt and dread. They had all left Earth behind, each for their own reasons. Some had fled poverty, others despair, and a few, like Daniel, had simply given up. But hearing those words now made it feel like they were being called back, not to help, but to answer for what they'd done. Rachel broke the silence. "Do you think anyone's still alive down there? Could this be survivors?" Samuel shook his head. "If there were survivors, they wouldn't have waited this long to reach out. This feels more like a warning." "A warning?" Claire echoed, her eyes wide. "From who? And about what?" Daniel crossed his arms, staring at the blinking lights on the console. "We won't know unless we investigate. Set a course for Earth." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Returning to Earth was risky, maybe even reckless. But ignoring the message felt worse, like turning their backs on whatever fate awaited them. As the Eos changed direction, heading toward the distant blue dot that had once been their home, none of them could shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger and far darker than they could imagine. As the Eos moved closer to Earth, the crew found themselves lost in their own thoughts. Each of them carried memories of the planet they had left behind, and the message from Earth stirred feelings they had long buried. Captain Daniel Carter sat alone in his quarters, staring at an old photograph on the wall. It showed a younger version of himself standing next to a group of scientists. They were smiling, proud of their work on a project meant to save another dying world. But that project had failed catastrophically, turning a barren planet into a toxic wasteland. Daniel had left Earth, not because he wanted a fresh start, but because he couldn't face what he had done. Rachel Monroe, meanwhile, was on the bridge, replaying the transmission over and over. She had grown up in one of Earth's overcrowded cities, where people fought for scraps of food and clean air. Her family had sold everything to get her a spot on the Eos, hoping she would find a better life among the stars. Rachel had always told herself she didn't look back, but now the voice from Earth made her wonder if leaving had been the right choice. Had she abandoned her home when it needed her most? In the engine room, Samuel Brooks worked silently, his hands moving quickly as he checked the ship's systems. He rarely talked about his past, but the message had shaken him. Samuel had once been a farmer, growing crops on land that slowly turned to dust. His wife and children had died during one of the worst famines in history, and he had blamed himself for not doing more to protect them. Joining the EOs had been his way of running away from the pain. Now, the idea of going back to Earth filled him with dread. Claire Foster, the biologist, spent her time in the lab, studying samples they had collected from other planets. She was the most hopeful of the crew, always believing that life could adapt and survive no matter how harsh the conditions. But even she felt uneasy after hearing the message. Claire had left Earth because she wanted to explore new worlds, to see what else the universe had to offer. Yet now, she wondered if humanity's mistakes had followed them into space. Was Earth truly gone, or had it changed into something unrecognizable? That night, the four of them gathered in the ship's small dining area. The mood was tense, and no one spoke at first. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "We all left Earth for different reasons," he said, his voice low. "But this message, it feels like it's meant for us, like it's reminding us of what we left behind." Rachel nodded. "Do you think it's a warning? Or a judgment?" "It could be both," Samuel replied. He leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Maybe whoever sent it wants us to know that Earth paid the price for our choices." Claire frowned. "But why send it now? Why wait so long?" Daniel sighed. "I don't know, but I do know we can't ignore it. Whatever's waiting for us on Earth, we have to face it. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who didn't make it off the planet." The others looked at him, unsure if they agreed. Rachel bit her lip, thinking about the risks. Samuel stared at the table, his mind racing with doubts. Claire gripped her cup tightly, torn between fear and curiosity. None of them knew what they would find when they reached Earth, but one thing was certain. The journey ahead would change them forever. The next day, Samuel Brooks spent hours in the engine room, trying to decode the strange signal from Earth. He was good with machines and puzzles, but this one felt different, more complicated than anything he had worked on before. The transmission wasn't just a voice. It carried layers of data hidden within its static. As he dug deeper, Samuel realized the signal hadn't come directly from Earth. It had bounced through a network of old satellites scattered across space, almost like someone, or something, was deliberately masking its origin. "This doesn't make sense," Samuel muttered to himself as he studied the readouts. "Why go through all this trouble? If they wanted us to hear it, why not send it straight?" Rachel Monroe joined him later, holding a tablet with her own findings. She had been analyzing the frequency of the message and noticed something odd. Embedded within the signal were traces of organic material, tiny fragments that didn't belong to any machine or satellite. "It's like part of the message is alive," she said, her voice tinged with both awe and unease. "I've never seen anything like it." Samuel frowned. "Alive? You mean biological? How is that even possible?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted, "but it's there. Whatever sent this message might not be human anymore." The idea sent a chill through Samuel. He thought about the stories they had heard growing up. Tales of experiments gone wrong, of humanity trying to merge with technology or alien life in desperate attempts to survive. Could Earth have become a place where such things were real? He shook his head, trying to focus. If it's not human, then what is it? And why are they calling us back? Meanwhile, Claire Foster was in the lab, running tests on the organic traces Rachel had discovered. She placed a small sample under a microscope, her hand steady despite the weight of what they were dealing with. What she saw made her gasp. The fragments weren't just biological. They were part plant, part machine, and something else entirely. They pulsed faintly, as if alive, yet they also emitted faint electrical signals. Claire couldn't explain how such a thing could exist, but one thing was clear. Earth had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Later that evening, the crew gathered again to share their findings. Daniel listened carefully as each of them spoke, his expression growing darker with every word. When they finished, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So we're saying Earth might still be alive," he said slowly. "But it's not the Earth we left behind. It's something else. Something dangerous," Rachel added. Her voice was quiet but firm. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there. This could be a trap." Claire hesitated before speaking. "Or it could be a chance. Maybe whatever sent this message needs our help. If Earth has changed, maybe we can learn from it and fix some of the mistakes we made." Samuel crossed his arms, his face skeptical. "And if it's hostile, what then? Do we risk the ship and our lives for a planet that's already dead?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. He knew they were right to be cautious, but he also felt a pull he couldn't ignore. The message had been addressed to them. After all, "We can't turn away now," he said finally. "Whatever's down there, we owe it to ourselves and to Earth to find out. But we'll do it carefully. We'll prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." The others nodded reluctantly, though none of them looked reassured. As the meeting ended and they went their separate ways, the tension aboard the EOs grew thicker. Earth was closer now, its shadow looming larger with each passing hour. None of them knew what awaited them, but the unanswered questions weighed heavily on their minds. The journey ahead would demand courage, caution, and perhaps sacrifices none of them were ready to make. As the EOs drew nearer to Earth, the mood aboard the ship grew heavier with each passing day. The crew tried to focus on their tasks, but the message from Earth lingered in their minds like an unanswered question. Tensions began to rise, and small disagreements turned into heated arguments. Rachel Monroe was the first to voice her doubts openly. "I don't think we should go," she said during one of their meetings. Her voice was firm, though her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. "We don't know what's waiting for us down there. It could be dangerous, maybe even deadly. Is it worth risking everything just to satisfy our curiosity?" Daniel Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but unreadable. "We've already discussed this, Rachel. We can't ignore the message. If there's even a chance Earth still has life or answers, we have to investigate. But at what cost?" Rachel shot back. "What if it's a trap? What if whatever's down there doesn't want visitors? Or worse, what if it blames us for what happened?" Samuel Brooks nodded in agreement. He had been quiet during most of the discussions, but now he spoke up. "She's right, Captain. This whole thing feels off. The signal bouncing through satellites, the organic traces, it's like they're hiding something. Maybe Earth isn't calling us back to hell. Maybe it's luring us in." Claire Foster frowned, shaking her head. She had always been the optimist of the group, but even she struggled to stay hopeful now. Still, she couldn't let fear take over. "We can't assume the worst without proof," she said. "Yes, it's risky, but isn't that why we came out here in the first place? To explore, to learn, to push forward no matter what. If we turn back now, we'll never know the truth." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Each of them knew she was right, but the uncertainty gnawed at their resolve. Samuel stood abruptly, pacing near the wall. "Fine," he said, his tone sharp. "Let's say we do go. How do we prepare for something we don't understand? What if we walk straight into a disaster?" "We'll take precautions," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "We'll scan the planet thoroughly before landing. If anything looks suspicious, we'll pull back, but we can't let fear stop us. Humanity ran away from Earth once. I won't do it again." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. She wanted to argue more, but deep down, she knew Daniel was right. They couldn't run forever. Still, the thought of returning to Earth filled her with dread. What if they found nothing but ruins? Or worse, what if they found something far more terrifying? Later that night, Samuel stayed up late in the engine room, tinkering with the ship's navigation system. He told himself he was making adjustments to ensure the EOS was ready for anything, but part of him considered altering the course entirely. What if he rerouted the ship away from Earth while the others slept? It would be easy enough to do. He shook his head, scolding himself for even thinking about it. Running wasn't the answer, but neither was walking blindly into danger. Meanwhile, Claire sat alone in the lab, staring at the glowing fragments of the organic material under the microscope. They pulsed faintly, almost rhythmically, as if alive. She wondered what kind of life could exist in such a form. Was it beautiful or horrifying? Would it welcome them, or see them as intruders? The question swirled in her mind, keeping her awake long after the others had gone to bed. By morning, the Eos was close enough to see Earth with the naked eye. Through the viewport, the planet looked both familiar and alien, a pale shadow of its former self. Its skies were darkened by ash, and strange crystalline structures jutted out from the surface like jagged teeth. The sight sent a shiver through the crew, but it also fueled their determination. Whatever awaited them on Earth, they knew they couldn't turn back now. The journey ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, and the choices they made next could change everything. The Eos entered Earth's orbit, and the crew gathered on the bridge to get their first real look at the planet. What they saw made their breath catch in their throats. Earth was barely recognizable. Its once blue oceans were now a sickly black, swirling with strange currents that seemed to glow faintly under the surface. The skies were thick with ash, blocking out most of the sunlight, and towering crystalline structures rose from the ground like jagged monuments. It wasn't just desolate, it was alien. "This isn't Earth," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "Not anymore." Daniel Carter stood silently, his eyes fixed on the view screen. He had seen images of Earth before it fell. Green forests, sprawling cities, vibrant life. But this was something else entirely. The planet looked dead, yet there was an eerie sense of activity about it. Lights flickered deep within the crystal towers, and strange energy pulses radiated from certain areas. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't stopped when humanity left. "We need to scan the surface," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. "Samuel, can you set up the sensors? Look for any signs of life, or anything artificial." Samuel nodded and got to work, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship's scanners began sweeping the planet, sending back streams of data. But almost immediately, things started to go wrong. The ship's systems began glitching, lights flickering on and off, and the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. "I don't know," Samuel replied, his brow furrowed as he tried to stabilize the equipment. "It's like the planet's interfering with our systems. This shouldn't be possible." Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. It wasn't coming from the ship, it was coming from outside. The sound vibrated through the walls, making their teeth ache and their heads throb. Rachel clutched her ears, wincing. "Make it stop," she shouted, but her words were drowned out by the noise. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the humming stopped. The lights stabilized, and the temperature returned to normal. For a moment, everyone froze, too stunned to speak. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Report," he ordered, his voice firm despite the unease in his eyes. Samuel glanced at his screen, his face pale. The scans picked up pockets of energy near the surface. "They're not natural. They're artificial. And," he hesitated, swallowing hard, "they're moving." "Moving?" Claire echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You mean alive?" Samuel shook his head. "I don't know what they are, but they're reacting to us, like they know we're here." Rachel turned to Daniel, her expression pleading. "We should leave. Now. This place is dangerous." Daniel didn't answer right away. He stared at the image of Earth on the screen, his mind racing. Something about the planet felt aware, as if it were watching them, waiting. But they had come too far to turn back now. "We'll send a landing party," he said finally. "Volunteers only." "I'm going," Claire said without hesitation. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. If there's life down there, I need to see it, to understand it. Rachel hesitated, then stepped forward. Me too. Someone has to make sure we don't walk into a trap. Daniel nodded. I'm going as well. Samuel, you stay with the ship. Keep the engines ready in case we need to leave quickly. Samuel opened his mouth to protest, but he closed it again, nodding reluctantly. Be careful, he said, his voice strained. Whatever's down there, it doesn't feel friendly. As the three prepared to board the shuttle, none of them could shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger and far darker than they had imagined. The planet loomed below them, silent and watchful, its secrets hidden beneath layers of ash and crystal. The message had brought them here, but the answers they sought might come at a price none of them were ready to pay. The shuttle descended through Earth's darkened skies, its engines straining against the thick clouds of ash. Daniel Carter gripped the controls tightly, his eyes scanning the barren landscape below. The crystalline towers loomed closer now, their jagged edges glinting faintly in the dim light. Rachel Monroe sat beside him, her face pale but determined, while Claire Foster checked their equipment one last time. None of them spoke. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavily in the air. They landed near the base of one of the largest towers, its surface shimmering with an unnatural glow. As the shuttle's hatch opened, a cold wind swept inside, carrying with it the smell of burnt metal and something else, something unrecognizable yet unsettling. Daniel stepped out first, his boots crunching on the brittle ground. Rachel followed, holding a scanner in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Claire brought up the rear, her bag of tools slung over her shoulder. This place feels wrong, Rachel muttered, her voice barely audible over the eerie silence. She shone her flashlight around, revealing twisted shapes embedded in the ground. Remnants of buildings, vehicles, and other structures, all fused together as if melted by some unimaginable force. It's like everything's been absorbed, Claire said softly, kneeling to examine a piece of debris. She ran her fingers over its surface, frowning. Look at this. It's not just rock or metal anymore. It's alive. Daniel nodded grimly. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with. They moved cautiously toward the tower, its massive form towering above them like a monolith. Up close, they could see intricate patterns etched into its surface, pulsing faintly with light. The patterns seemed to shift and change as they approached, almost as if responding to their presence. Rachel raised her scanner, studying the readings. There's energy coming from inside, she said. It's strong, stronger than anything I've ever seen. Let's go in, Daniel decided, stepping forward. He touched the surface of the tower, expecting it to be solid, but his hand passed through as if it were made of liquid. Startled, he pulled back quickly, but the others had already noticed. It's letting us in, Claire said, her voice tinged with wonder. Like it wants us to see something. Taking a deep breath, Daniel led the way, stepping through the shimmering barrier. Inside, the air was cool and still, filled with a faint humming sound that resonated in their chests. The walls were smooth and translucent, glowing softly with shifting colors. Strange symbols floated in the air, hovering like holograms, but none of them recognized the language. This is incredible, Claire whispered, her eyes wide as she examined the symbols. It's like technology and biology combined. But how? Rachel pointed her scanner at the walls, her expression growing more troubled. There's organic material here too, she said, mixed with the structure itself. This isn't just a building. It's alive. As they ventured deeper, they began to notice other things. Fragments of human artifacts scattered throughout the space, half buried in the glowing walls. A child's toy, a broken watch, a tattered photograph, all preserved but altered, as if the tower had consumed them and made them part of itself. Then they found the recordings. In a large chamber at the heart of the tower, holographic images flickered to life, showing scenes of Earth's final days. People working frantically to merge human bodies with machines, desperate attempts to survive as the planet collapsed around them. One figure stood out, a woman, her face gaunt but resolute, speaking the same words they had heard in the transmission. "This is the end you chose." Daniel stared at the image, his chest tight with emotion. "She's talking to us," he said quietly. "To humanity." Claire reached out, touching the hologram as if hoping to connect with it. What happened to them? Did they succeed or fail? Before anyone could answer, the room shifted. The walls began to pulse faster, the hum growing louder. The symbols in the air rearranged themselves, forming new shapes that seemed to point toward the exit. Something was changing, and it wasn't clear if it was welcoming them or warning them to leave. "We need to go," Rachel said urgently, backing toward the entrance. "Now." Daniel hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. Finally, he nodded. "Let's move." As they hurried back to the shuttle, the tower behind them seemed to glow brighter, as if watching their retreat. None of them spoke until they were safely aboard the Eos, the planet shrinking in the distance. Whatever they had witnessed, it left them with more questions than answers, and a sense that Earth's transformation was far from over. Back aboard the Eos, the crew gathered in the lab to review what they had discovered in the crystalline tower. The holographic recordings they had seen were replayed on a small screen, their flickering images casting shadows on the walls. The woman's voice echoed through the room once more. "This is the end you chose." Each time the words played, they felt heavier, as if carrying the weight of humanity's mistakes. Claire Foster sat closest to the screen, her eyes fixed on the footage. She paused it occasionally to zoom in on certain details. The strange machines, the desperate faces of the people, the glowing implants embedded in their skin. "They were trying to survive," she said softly. "But they didn't just adapt. They changed themselves. They became something else. Something not human anymore," Rachel Monroe added, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was pale, and her voice carried a note of unease. "Those hybrids, they weren't alive in the way we understand it. They were part machine, part something alien." Daniel Carter leaned against the wall, his expression grim. He had been silent for most of the discussion, but now he spoke. "Do you think they're still down there? Alive, or whatever passes for alive?" Claire hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think so. The energy readings we picked up, the organic material fused with the tower, it all points to them surviving. But they're not the same species we left behind. They've evolved, or been transformed, into something new." Samuel Brooks, who had stayed behind on the ship, listened intently from the corner of the room. His hands were clasped tightly together, his knuckles white. "And what do they want from us?" he asked, his voice low. "If they're still alive, why send that message? Why call us back after all this time?" No one had an answer. The question hung in the air, unanswered and unsettling. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Maybe they want us to see what happened, to understand the cost of what we did or didn't do." Rachel shook her head. "Or maybe they blame us. We abandoned Earth when it needed us most. What if they see us as traitors?" Claire frowned. "Considering this, it's possible, but I don't think they're hostile. Not yet, anyway. If they wanted to hurt us, they could have done it already. The tower let us in. It showed us those recordings. Maybe they're trying to communicate. But why?" Samuel pressed. "What's the point? Are they asking for help, or are they warning us about something?" The room fell quiet as the crew tried to make sense of it all. None of them could shake the feeling that the hybrids, if that's what they were, had a purpose in summoning them back. Whether it was redemption, revenge, or something else entirely, the answer remained out of reach. After a long pause, Daniel straightened up, his jaw set with determination. "We need to go back," he said firmly. "Not just to the tower, but deeper. There's more to learn, and we won't find it by running away." Rachel looked at him sharply. "Are you serious? After everything we've seen?" We barely made it out last time. And what's the alternative? Daniel shot back, leaving without answers, pretending none of this matters. That's not an option. Flair nodded slowly, agreeing with him. He's right. If we leave now, we'll always wonder. And if there's even a chance we can help or fix what went wrong, we have to take it. Samuel sighed, rubbing his temples. Fine, but we go prepared this time. Whatever's down there, it's not playing by our rules. As the crew began planning their next descent, none of them noticed the faint hum that had returned to the ship. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it seemed to resonate with the same rhythm as the pulse they had felt in the tower. Earth wasn't done with them yet, and the choices they made next would shape not only their fate, but perhaps the future of humanity itself. The crew returned to Earth's surface with a mix of fear and determination. This time, they were better prepared, carrying reinforced suits and tools designed to handle the strange energy radiating from the planet. The shuttle landed near another crystalline tower, larger and more imposing than the one they had visited before. Its surface shimmered with an eerie glow, and faint vibrations could be felt through the ground as they approached. Daniel Carter led the way, his steps cautious but steady. Rachel Monroe followed closely, her scanner already picking up unusual readings. Claire Foster brought up the rear, her bag filled with equipment for collecting samples. None of them spoke. The atmosphere around them was too heavy, too charged with an unspoken tension. As they stepped inside the tower, the air seemed to hum louder, resonating in their chests. The walls pulsed with light, and the same shifting symbols from before floated in the air, rearranging themselves as if watching their movements. But this time, something was different. The deeper they went, the more the environment changed. The smooth, translucent walls gave way to jagged organic shapes, like roots or veins, pulsing with life. Then they saw them. At first, the figures were shadows, barely visible in the dim light. But as the crew moved closer, the forms became clearer. They were humanoid but not entirely human. Their bodies glowed faintly, covered in a lattice of crystal-like material that merged seamlessly with flesh. Eyes, too large, too bright, stared at the intruders without blinking. These were the hybrids, the remnants of humanity transformed into something new. One of the figures stepped forward, its movements fluid yet unnatural. It raised a hand, and a voice echoed in their minds, not spoken aloud, but transmitted directly into their thoughts. "You left us," it said, the words cold and accusing. "When we needed you most, you fled." Daniel took a step forward, his voice steady despite the knot of dread in his stomach. "We didn't know what to do. We thought Earth was lost. We were trying to survive." The hybrid tilted its head, studying him. "Survival comes at a cost. You abandoned your home, your people, and now you return, unchanged." Rachel gripped her scanner tightly, her hands trembling. "We're sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "We didn't mean to leave you behind. But what are you now? Are you still human?" The figure paused, as if considering the question. "We are what you made us, flesh and machine, bound together by necessity. Humanity chose this path long before we completed it." Claire stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "Is there any part of you that's still human? Do you remember who you were?" The hybrid's gaze softened slightly, though its expression remained unreadable. "We remember, but memory is not enough. We exist now in a state beyond your understanding." And yet, it hesitated, its glowing eyes flickering. "We seek connection, understanding." Daniel frowned, sensing an opening. "If you want us to understand and tell us, what do you want from us?" The hybrid extended its hand again, and a surge of images flooded their minds. Visions of Earth's destruction, the desperate experiments to save humanity, the pain and loss endured during the transformation. When the visions faded, the creature spoke once more. "We do not blame you for leaving, but you must carry this truth. What happened here will happen again if nothing changes. Your kind cannot run forever. Rachel swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. What can we do? How can we help? The hybrid lowered its arm, its form beginning to fade back into the shadows. Remember us. Warn those who follow. And choose wisely, for this is the end you chose. With that, the figure disappeared, leaving the crew alone in the pulsing chamber. The walls began to shift, urging them toward the exit. As they hurried back to the shuttle, the weight of the encounter settled over them. Whatever these beings were, they weren't hostile. But they weren't forgiving either. The message was clear. Humanity's survival depended on learning from its mistakes. Back aboard the EOS, the crew sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They had found answers, but those answers only raised more questions. One thing was certain: their journey was far from over. The EOS drifted silently in orbit around Earth, its crew grappling with the weight of what they had seen and heard. The encounter with the hybrids had left them shaken but resolute. Each member of the team felt the burden of responsibility pressing down on them, knowing that the fate of humanity, and perhaps other worlds, might depend on the choices they made next. Rachel Monroe sat alone in the communications room, staring at the console. Her mind replayed the hybrid's words over and over. Remember us. Warn those who follow. She knew what she had to do. Turning to face Daniel Carter, who stood nearby, she spoke with quiet determination. I'm staying, she said simply, her voice steadied despite the fear in her eyes. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. What? No. We need you here, Rachel. You're part of this crew. I know, she replied, her hands gripping the edge of the table. But I can't leave again. Not after what I've seen. If these hybrids are trying to communicate, if they want understanding, then someone needs to stay and bridge the gap. Someone who understands how to listen. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped himself. He could see the resolve in her eyes, the same stubbornness that had driven her to join the mission in the first place. It's too dangerous, he said finally, his tone softer. We don't know what they'll do once we're gone. They won't hurt me, Rachel insisted. They let us go before. They didn't attack, didn't threaten. They just wanted us to understand. And if I stay, maybe I can help them trust us. Maybe I can learn more about what they are and why they exist. Claire Foster entered the room just as Rachel finished speaking. Her expression was conflicted, but she nodded slowly. She's right, Claire admitted. If we leave now, we'll lose this chance. But if Rachel stays, she might be able to open a dialogue, not just for us, but for everyone out there who doesn't know what happened here. Samuel Brooks appeared in the doorway, his face pale but resolute. Are you sure about this? He asked Rachel, his voice tinged with worry. Once we leave, there's no coming back for you. I'm sure, Rachel said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. This is where I belong now. It's not just about fixing the past. It's about making sure the future doesn't repeat it. Daniel sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to argue further, to insist that they all return to the ship and leave Earth behind once more. But deep down, he knew Rachel was right. Someone had to take the risk, to step into the unknown and try to build a connection. If they ran away now, they would be abandoning Earth all over again. And that wasn't something he could live with. Okay, Daniel said finally, his voice heavy with emotion. If this is what you want, we'll support you. But promise me one thing. You'll send updates. Let us know you're safe. Rachel nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I promise. Later that day, the crew gathered on the shuttle deck to say their goodbyes. Rachel hugged each of them tightly, her voice breaking as she thanked them for trusting her decision. Don't forget what you've seen here, she told them. Tell the rest of humanity what happened. Tell them this is the end we chose. As the shuttle lifted off, Rachel stood alone on the surface of Earth, watching the EOS shrink into the distance. Behind her, the crystalline towers pulsed faintly, their glow reflecting off her suit. She didn't feel afraid anymore, only determined. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it head-on, carrying the lessons of Earth's transformation with her. On board the Eos, the remaining crew members stared out the viewport, their hearts heavy with both pride and sorrow. They had come seeking answers, but they were leaving with a new purpose. Humanity's mistakes couldn't be undone, but they could be remembered and avoided in the future. As the ship turned away from Earth and set a course for the stars, none of them doubted that Rachel's sacrifice would echo far beyond their lifetimes.